All right, today we're going to look at building the drawer for the cabinet that we've built so far. Now, when we talk about the drawer, there's a specific parameters that we've got to follow when building it. We need it to be exactly 1 inch shorter than the opening and exactly 1 inch narrower than the opening width-wise. So we need to make sure that we measure and accurately get that 1 inch smaller. Otherwise, we will have problems later on with the drawer fitting in. So if I come up here and take my measurement, I'm at 9 1/16. So we want our drawer to be 8 1/16. And I'm going to measure height-wise, and I'm getting 6 inches, so we want to be 5 inches. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take a piece of plywood and we're going to rip out all of our pieces so our pieces all end up 5 inches tall all at one time. That way we don't have any issues with it later on with one being smaller or bigger than the other. So we're going to go grab a piece of plywood and rip out our drawer parts. So I've got a piece of wood here that we're going to use to cut out our drawer parts. We need all of our pieces to be 5 inches high. So we're going to come over here and set the saw to 5 inches using the cursor on the saw. And right on the money there. And we need to set the blade height, of course, when we come up to the machine. We should only have it about 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to rotate that down until we're about 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch above the workpiece. Now what we're going to do is rip off 4 of these pieces. We need to be actually we're just going to need 2 to be able to build our drawers. We should be able to get 2 pieces out of each one. So we'll turn it on. And now we have 2 strips for our pieces. Okay, we're going to cut these. We're going to start with our front and back. They need to be exactly 1 inch shorter. So we were at 9 1/16. We're going to set this to 8 1/16. And I'm going to get that as accurate as I can. And secure that in place. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take our board, we're going to cut off a little bit off the end. That way we're going to get rid of anything. We're going to make sure that the factory edge, we're going to make sure that it's square or 90 degrees. And then we're going to flip it over and cut the rest off. So we're going to lightly shave one side. We're going to flip it over and cut the rest off. So these are going to be our front and our back. Now I did not, on the second piece, flip it over and cut a little off because that was already the side that was cut just a minute ago. So we knew it was square. So I didn't need to flip that over like I did on the first one. So that's why we didn't do that. Now we're going to go put some joints in here so we can figure out how long the sides need to be. All right, here we are at the dado blade. And we are going to get our rabbets set so that we can cut rabbets on the front and backs of our drawer. Now the rabbet is an okay joint for a drawer. It's going to give us some extra gluing surface area as well as keep our pieces nice and straight or vertical as we glue. So we're going to get that set up. One easy way to set that up is to take our fence over and we are going to do a rabbet. So we're going to just take this scrap piece that we have here and get it even with the tooth on the saw blade. So get that nice and even. Now I'm still going to run a test piece just to make sure that I have it where I want it. So I'm going to get my push block and we're going to run a test piece through here. The other thing we're going to want to do is make sure the blade height is set about 3/8 of an inch high, or half the thickness of the wood. Okay, it doesn't have to be right on the money, but it should be pretty close to half the thickness of the wood. So we're going to run our test piece, turn the machine on. Actually, we need to get the guard in place, and we'll lower that down for your safety, and then we'll make our cut. What we're looking at is to get the joint, the test piece that we just run, nice and flush with our piece here. So we're looking for a nice flush joint. It shouldn't be sticking over and it shouldn't be short like something like that, okay? It should be nice and flush or even when we're done. To me, that feels pretty darn close. And so we're gonna go with that. Now that we've run our test piece, we're going to take our two good pieces and run them through just how we did. Now I'm going to look at my grain and my patterns, and I'm going to put my good side down so it gets joints on it, because I want the good side to be inside the drawer when I'm done. So whatever side looks best to you, kind of a personal preference on that, and then run your joints. All right, we're back over at the cabinet. We're going to measure to see how deep this project is from front to back. And if I take my tape measure and measure, we're pretty close, 12 inches as I'd say we're at. So we're gonna take 12 inches and subtract 2. That's how deep we want our drawer to be. So we're gonna be looking at a 10-inch deep drawer. So if we're gonna figure this out, we wanna be 10 inches when we're done. We're gonna take 10 inches minus the material that's left over. So if I put these two back to back, you can see my rabbets here. I'm going to take 10 inches minus about 5/8, and that's going to be 9 3/8. So 9 3/8 is where we're going to be for our side lengths. Let's go cut those off that other strip we have. All right, we've got our other strip. We're going to do the same thing we did before, cut a little off one side and then flip it over to get this squared up. We need 2 pieces, so we're going to cut 2 of them at 9 3/8 for this one. So we've got our two pieces. Now we're gonna go do a dry fit and make sure everything fits together how it should and is the right size. All right, we are here for our dry fit. We're gonna put the drawer together without any glue to make sure all of our pieces are the right size and that we don't end up big or small. So when I put it together like this, I'm gonna measure and I should be at 8 1/16, which looks good. And this way I want to finish about 10 inches and we're maybe just 32nd of an inch over, which will be okay for the drawer length because we subtracted 2 inches off of here so we don't run into the back. So we have plenty of room in the back for that 1/16 of an inch or 32nd of an inch. We're gonna be okay on that. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna cut a groove into the bottom edge of our pieces so that the bottom can slide in. We're here at the router table. This is where we're going to put that groove in. I have a 1/4 inch bit installed in the machine. Okay, 1/4 inch straight bit. And we're going to have a 1/2 inch material set between here. So we can go ahead and get that set. I've got the machine unplugged, the cord's right here, so I don't accidentally turn it on. I'm gonna put my tape measure against the fence, and what I'm looking for is a 1/2 inch between the fence and the first edge of that cutter. And you're gonna adjust the fence accordingly so you get a 1/2 inch groove or a 1/2 inch material between your groove when you're done. So I've got that set. The other thing we need to look at is the blade height. So I'm gonna take my Rabbet and I'm gonna turn that upside down and put it over my bit. And this is going to allow me to see if I am at the right height. And that looks pretty close. That looks pretty close for what we're doing. So we'll go ahead and run these through here. I need a push block to keep my hand a safe distance because we're going to be running through like this. The other thing I'm going to look for is the edge of the wood. I'm going to look and make sure there's no bad spots or voids. If there is, I might put those towards the fence so it's at the bottom of the drawer. So go ahead and get the machine plugged in and get your push block ready. And we're gonna run all 4 of our pieces of our drawer through. So if I just take a minute ahead of time and lay these out so I know which side I want against the fence, if there's any voids or bad spots, I can have them the right way. I'm going to turn it on. It's going to get loud, but we're going to run this through, and all it's going to do is cut that groove in for us. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 4 pieces and I'm going to take the front and the back, one of the two, and we're going to cut this groove off. We put it there for a reference point. We're going to cut it off now so that the backing can slide in. So I'm going to set one of them aside because one of them gets left alone. The other side gets cut off. And so I'm going to measure that. We're at 4 3/16. I am going to go to 4 3/16 on the table saw and we're going to cut this. So I've got the table saw set to 4 3/16. Now I'm going to put the biggest part of the wood between the fence. So when I cut that off, this piece falls away. If I were to have the fence super close, I would not have room for my push stick to get through if we were trying to cut this the other way. If I had that this way, I would not have room for my push stick to clear the fence and the guard. So I'm going to turn it so the big part's between there, and we're going to cut it to 4 3/16. So we're going to take the orbital sander at our downdraft table, and we're going to sand the inside part of these so that, again, so that we can get them with the orbital sander. If we wait till later after the box is constructed, there won't be enough room. So I'm going to turn the downdraft table on and do my sanding. All right, today we're going to use the narrow crown stapler to assemble this. I like this option for the drawer because it does have this little fork shape that will shoot in there, and so we'll have 2 prongs with a little bit of material stuck between that top loop. And so that's why I like to use this for the drawer. Go ahead and load it and get it connected to the air hose. And we will put a little bit of glue on the rabbets. Okay, you might want to get any dust off of the rabbets that may be there. And we're going to put a little bit of glue on there. It doesn't take a lot. We don't want to make a mess, especially on the inside of the drawer. I'm putting some glue on there. And I'm going to start with one side, and I'm going to get that nice and even. So I'm going to look at the top edge here, and I'm going to get that nice and even. And I'm going to watch my fingers as I shoot this in. I do not want to get that coming out the side. And I shoot one in, and then I can push in and go to the bottom and put the other in. And one in the middle for now. Okay, that first one is the most difficult. From there, then we can just take this piece and pretty much stand it up like this and get that nailed in. So it's just that first one that is a little bit more difficult to get held in place. And I'm going to make sure that joint's nice and tight, and I'm going to watch my fingers and shoot the staples in. Now you can see it leaves kind of a big mark on here, and that's okay because it's the drawer. It's going to be covered up. The drawer front is going to be on the good side, and you won't see that. But we wouldn't want to shoot this in anywhere that we would see on a regular basis. Now we're going to flip this over, and we're going to put the other side on. Another thing to note is that when you're nailing this together, be sure you don't get any of the staples coming through into your rabbet or dado that you have, because then your bottom won't slide in all the way. So we're going to take our last piece here, and I'm going to look for the better side, and I'm going to put that up, and that looks good. So I'm going to put some glue on there. And we're going to get that lined up on the top side. That's kind of our important side. When the drawer's together, we want it to be nice and even. And come to the other side, get that one pulled in. I had a nail shoot out the side. I'd rather have this on the outside than the inside, but we can take that with a pliers and break that off. We really want to try to avoid that, but we can break it off, and then right where the enters the wood, we can take a nail set and push that down so we don't see it. So we're back at my mistake here. We're going to take our pliers and kind of bend this or get this out of here. Just rock it back and forth, and that metal will get weak and eventually break. There you go. If you're left with a piece of metal right on the top edge, you could take your nail set and hammer and just tap that down. We're pretty good here, but if you have a bulge sticking out, take that nail set and tap down the edge, and then take your wood filler and put a little bit of filler in there to cover it up. Okay, so now we're going to cut the bottom. So we need to measure for the bottom. We're going to take our tape measure, and we should be able to measure from groove to groove. That's an easy one for us to get. I'm going to pull it out to 1 inch. That way I don't have to hold that little metal edge on my board there. So I'm going to hold it out to 1 inch and measure, and I'm getting 8 5/16. But we got to take that 1 inch off. So we're going to be at 7 5/16 that direction. Now the other direction, we should be, because we set this as high as the other rabbet when we cut this, we should be able to measure from the edge of that board all the way to the back of the cabinet, which I'm going to say we're going to be about 10 and let's say 3/4. If we tip it on side, we might get a better measurement. We can measure from that ledge there to back here. 9 and 13/16 is where we should be. 9 and 13/16. 9 and 13/16 by 7 5/16. We're going to find a 1/4 inch piece of plywood to fit in there. So I've got my 1/4 inch piece of plywood here. We're going to cut it to 7 5/16 wide. So we're going to do that at the table saw. 7 5/16. I might just go about a 32nd of an inch less so it can slide in without binding. And we're going to cut this. Now we're going to cut our backing piece to 9 11/16. We're going to cut a little off one side and square that up and flip it over and cut the rest off. Now we're going to take our piece, we're going to go orbital sand it, and we're going to install it. So by building our drawer with a removable bottom, we can take it out if it breaks or if we need to clean it. Maybe you spill some liquid inside and you need to take it out and clean it. I'm going to take the better looking side and put that towards the inside of the drawer. And I'm going to slide this in and tap it down so it's in that bottom groove real far. And we should be nice and even if we got our measurement right. And I'm going to simply just take a screw and hold this in place. So I'm going to take my screw and my driver and I'm going to hit that backing piece of my drawer and just drive it in so it holds it. Now inside the drawer it's nice and secure and not going to go anywhere. So what I'm going to do next is we're going to take and just sand these joints nice and even, get rid of any glue that's on there, and then we will go from there.
Now you may have noticed that I kept the sander moving. I didn't just stay in the corner where maybe there was some glue marks. That way we don't get a low spot. We kind of sanded the whole thing and not just one spot. Now what we're going to do is we're going to give you the option to round the edge of the drawer. So I'm going to show you that process. It'll kind of make the drawer just a little bit sleeker, a little bit nicer, higher quality. Just gives it a round edge so you don't have any sharp edges to hit your fingers on. So I've picked one of our smallest round over bits to put a little rounded edge on this project. What we're going to do is set the height. I've got the machine unplugged so nobody can turn it on us. I'm going to take a scrap piece, and what I want is the bottom of this radius right here where my finger is, the bottom of that radius to be just under my workpiece. So if I take my workpiece edge here and line it up, you can see we're a little high. So I'm going to get underneath the machine and lower that down. I want just the radius. I don't want any line cut in there. And there's just a little flap of wood there causing me some grief. And get that so you can see it a little bit better. And just so it slides underneath is what we're looking for. We're going to get the machine plugged back in, and we're going to actually be running our drawer around the edge like this, all the way around, and then we're going to set our drawer on top of the bit and run the inside edge. So we're going to get the drawer or the fence set up so that it can be our guide for us. We want the bearing to be right about even with the fence. For this cut, and then we're going to plug it in and run all four outside edges of the drawer top. So only on this top edge are we running these outside edges. Okay, not down the corner. Don't do that. Don't do the bottom, just the top. Alright, so it just gave us a little broken edge here. Now what we're going to do is move the fence out of the way so we can do the inside edge. Now when we drop our drawer onto this, we're going to be running it through the router the other direction. Because we're working on the back side of the cutter, we want to feed it opposite the way the bit spins. We were working on the front side of the cutter, so we go this way. Now on the back side of the cutter, we need to go the other way. So what I'm doing here is as that bit is spinning, I'm bringing my workpiece in to the bearing and running it along to the corner. Now I can go back a little bit too, or I could stop and turn my piece and do my edges. And at this point now we have radius edges inside and out. It just kind of smooths that drawer out. And now we're going to go to the sander and sand these edges to get rid of any rough marks. So back here at the downdraft table, I'm going to keep my sander nice and flat on top. And when I do my radiuses, I'm going to just roll it down the edges.
and roll it towards the inside. Keep it moving to keep that radius shape. If I keep it flat, I'm going to get a line or a chamfer rather than a radius. We should have a nice smooth top, smooth edges, so if you rub your hand on it while you're getting in and out of the cabinet, it's pleasing. It doesn't leave any slivers or sharp edges. All right, we're back here at our cabinet. What we're going to do is make the solid drawer front that overlaps the drawer box. So the drawer front is going to have a 1/2 inch overlay, which means it lays over the face frame a 1/2 inch. So that's going to be an inch total. So if we measure this, it was 9 1/16. We should be at 10 1/16 that way. And if this is 6, we should be at 7 inches tall. So go ahead and get your board, find a board that will work to make this drawer front, and we'll get this cut to size. So I'm getting ready to cut my drawer front. The length of the drawer front was 10 1/16, but that's a little small for our machines. We want to maintain a minimum of 12 inches long. So 12 inches, actually 12 1/16 would be our rough cut anyways. When we do our rough cut, we add 2 inches on. So if we're at 10 1/16 for a finished size, plus 2 inches is 12 1/16. That works out good because 12 inches is our minimum length to run through the machine. So we'll get this lined up and go ahead and cut this. So here's our rough drawer front. We're going to take it to the jointer and joint one of the edges to get a straight edge so we can work it through on the table saws. All right, here we are at the jointer. We're getting ready to get a straight edge on our drawer front. Just like our other procedures, we're going to run it through. We are taller than the fence, so we don't need a push stick or a push block. We're going to keep our hands out of the way and keep it tight to the fence. Let's take this to the table saw and rip it to our 7 inches wide, and we will get our drawer front to start taking shape. All right, we've got it set to 7 inches. I've got my push stick ready to go so that we can safely push it through. My jointed edge needs to be on the fence. You can see that edge is really rough. That's not my jointed edge. We want the jointed edge against the fence as we cut. So before we cut this to length, we want to get it sanded through our wide belt sander to about the same size as our top and our door will be. So we're going to get it sanded to about 7/8 of an inch. The material comes in at 15/16, but we're going to measure this ahead of time to make sure that we don't have a faulty thick piece of wood. So I'm going to take my caliper and measure and make sure it zeroes out before you use it and take a measurement. We're at about 0.93. So I'm going to set my machine to 0.93 and we will go from there. So I'm going to use my up and down button to get to 0.93. I'm going to bring it down to 0.93. And sometimes this one sticks. You have to go down before you can go back up. There we go, 0.93. I'm going to turn the machine on. The needle's going to spike. When it comes back down, we're ready to use it. And we're going to turn the belt onto the low speed. We're going to run this through a couple times on each side, get it nice and cleaned up, is all that we're trying to do right now. So we'll turn it on, make sure the blast gate's open when you're using this machine. turn it off with the small button and wait for it to come to a complete stop. All right, we're going to go ahead and get our solid drawer front cut to size. We're going to cut it to 10 and 1/16. So just like my other cuts, I'm going to take a little off one side, then I'm going to flip it over and take the rest off the other side. That's going to square up my two sides to my side that was originally jointed. Okay, so I'm going to turn the machine. I've got the bigger radius put in here, and I'm going to get this set just like I did for the drawer top. I'm going to get it set so this radius is just underneath the workpiece. So we're going to raise this up a little bit. We don't want the line from the cutter in there, so I'm just going to be just this side of that radius. And tighten that up. And now we're going to run this through. We want the fence to be even with the bearing. So I'm going to bring the fence up to use that as a guide and lift it up so I'm on top of the bearing, or on top of the cutter, but even with the bearing, and tighten that up. And I can plug it in. So we are ready to router this. We are going to run this through the router end grain first. So we're going to run the end grains first because it chips out on the back side, and then we will come and do with the grain when we're done. Now we're going to go and sand the edges at the downdraft table. All right, now we're going to get ready to install the drawer front. We have two sides of the drawer. We have the front and the back, and those are identifiable because the back has the bottom cut off. Okay, so the front side is going to be the one that's full all the way down. We're going to pre-drill some holes through the inside and countersink them. We're going to use our drill bit that will pre-drill and countersink at the same time. I'm going to drill 4 holes, one in each corner of the drawer, and that's going to be to attach the solid drawer front. Now we're going to get ready to line up the drawer front. I'm going to take the solid drawer front and lay it on the table. I'm going to take my drawer and get any burrs that might be on the front off of there so that it sits nice and even. And I'm going to take my drawer front and get it lined up on the solid front. I am going to use my tape measure to measure, and the drawer box is a 1/2 inch smaller than the opening on each side. So 1 inch smaller than the opening. This is 1 inch bigger than the opening, so we should have 1 inch difference all the way around. So I'm going to take my tape measure on the sides and make sure it's somewhat square on there by measuring 1 inch. I'm going to turn it, and oh, that needs to be moved down. Okay, and once I get it in place, And it doesn't hurt to double check your measurements. Check them a couple times, because once you start putting screws in, it's hard to make adjustments because your screw will want to follow the old screw hole. So I'm just getting it fine-tuned, double checking the work, and now I'm going to clamp this to the table so that it doesn't move when I put my screw in. And for now, I'm going to just put one screw in each side. This way it will allow me to make any adjustments later and have two fresh holes to use. So I want to make sure that this fits in the opening good and doesn't have any problems, and then I will come back later and add the two extra screws. And I'm just going to move my clamp over very gently so the drawer doesn't shift. Okay, it's not a bad idea to double check the length of your screw. Our box typically only has 1¼ inch screws in there, but somebody may have put a longer one in. You want to make sure you don't have more than about 1¼ inch screw. When attaching these, you don't want it to come through the front. So our drawer front is attached to the box.